Friday's ESPN FC Live. Welcome wherever you are. My name is Mark Donaldson. Delighted to be alongside Stevie Nicol, James Ollie, and Ryan O'Hanlon from ESPN.com. Now, coming up, we'll look ahead to some of the big games in the Premier League this weekend. Arsenal trying to get back on track. They welcome Crystal Palace in the early game. Liverpool go to Bournemouth on Sunday. Plus, the transfer window is still open. Ryan's written an article on the do's and don'ts of what to get up to increase the chances of having a good transfer window. Before we get to any of that, though, Stevie Nicol just threw something at us just before we came on air, and I need to know more about a pre-match diet. When you were at Liverpool on a Friday, what did Kenny Dalglish do?
He would bring in Scotch pies and Heinz baked beans for the Scottish lads. That was our rocket fuel for the weekend on away trips.
Diets. I mean, when you were as good as you guys were, did it even matter what you ate?
Well, when you're winning, you can get away with it. I would like to think that they wouldn't have changed anything had we not been particularly good, but I don't think anyone would have allowed that.
I'm going to keep it, try and keep it relevant, James. And when you've got an early game like Arsenal and Crystal Palace have, see what I did there? 12:30 on Saturday. Pre-match meals probably at 9:30. There'll not be Scotch pies, but you've kind of got forced chicken down your neck when you're normally having cornflakes and toast.
Well, I mean, if we're going to get into this, there's obviously pre-match food, right? I mean, I expect that at the Emirates tomorrow there will be some sort of fry-up, which is normally quite good. And you can imagine this, standard sausage, bacon, eggs, tomatoes, mushrooms. Yeah, I mean, I'm salivating thinking about it now. It's actually one of the best meals they do. So bring it on.
See, I mean, Ryan's sitting there in Los Angeles. It's nice and early for him, and there's talk of Scotch pies and fry-ups, and you're probably used to some healthy chicken if you cover MLS, or if you come over here, Liverpool's your team, you go to Anfield. It's the way it is these days. Anyway, I digress. Producer Sam and Bethan are probably saying, get on with it, idiot. Okay, Arsenal against Crystal Palace tomorrow. Let's hear from Mikel Arteta about the run of form that they've been on, but they've had a little break. And now, are they ready to go?
We are recharged, we are full of energy and super motivated. The team is super motivated, and we want to attack the second half of the season with a lot of ambitions and with the understanding that the team is capable of big things, and they are convinced of that. I think it gives us the opportunity as well to look at things with a bit of perspective as well, to analyze what we've been doing, and we take a lot of positives from the first 6 months of the competition. And even though results haven't gone our way in the last few games, when you look at what we have produced in terms of the Premier League with any other team, we are up there. But if you don't produce the number of chances that we have created and expect that we create more than any other team in the league, for sure we're not going to score enough goals. But I love the players that I have and the way they work and the way they go about it, and that will come for sure. The question we said, okay, how do we score 5 goals every game? And that's a question, right? How are we going to do it? And the rest is just there. And we expect it to change it tomorrow. It's not going to happen. So we have to make things happen, and we have to be active and find solutions to that.
Stevie, how worried should Arsenal fans be? 4 points from the last 5 games, defeats against Aston Villa, against Fulham as well, and West Ham. And they kind of really need 3 points against Palace in this one tomorrow. Are they refreshed? Are they recharged? Or should they be worried?
I think right now there's always going to be doubt in their mind. If ever there's a party pooper, it's this team they're playing against. They enjoy sitting tight, giving nothing away, and then trying to hit you on the break. I mean, they're the ultimate party poopers. And unfortunately for Arsenal, they're going to have to solve problems that they haven't been able to all season. And that is playing against teams, particularly at home, who are going to sit tight and deny you any real space. And so far, they haven't been able to crack open the safe. They haven't. I listened to Mikel Arteta. They're talking about all the chances. Well, the problem is the chances they're creating are, the majority of them are half chances, which is completely different to what they were doing last year because they had more time and more space. not as many teams were sitting deep. And so that's the difference. They have to be more accurate. They have to do it quicker. Everything has to be done on a more consistent basis for them than they did last year, because of the time and space that they don't have, particularly in the penalty box. So if you're an Arsenal fan, you're a little apprehensive about this, because on the face of it, on paper, at home against this team, you should be winning 3 or 4 comfortably. But so far this season, that's not what's been happening. So I think without doubt, if you're an Arsenal fan, you're a little apprehensive, I think is the word.
It's funny, James, isn't it? Because Arsenal, when they go 2 points within Liverpool's reach at the top of the table, but they're 10 points worse off than they were last season. So what's changed?
Yeah, I mean, I've written quite a lot about this. Fundamentally, their issue is that they were heavily reliant on Saka, Martinelli and Odegaard last season to continue a quite ridiculous run of form for 38 games. And what happened was, come April, May, they ran out of steam, basically, and those players started to tire. They started to snatch at their chances, and they lost a little bit of composure. And I think what's happened in those 4 or 5 games between Christmas and New Year, or around that time, it's a similar sort of trait. You know, what they're not getting is enough of an end product from their centre forwards, and therefore there is much more pressure on Saka and Martinelli, Odegaard behind, and if it's Havertz playing as the other number 8 in that 4-3-3 system, to go and deliver and go and produce for them. And what's happening at the moment is that those players aren't able to hit those extremely high levels from last season. Not a criticism necessarily of those individuals, but Stevie's right. Also, teams are starting to work them out a little bit. I think they know that necessarily the threat isn't going to come through the middle. It's going to come out wide, and they are able to kind of close down those pockets of space and be compact and be a bit more resilient. And then they're also leaking the odd goal at the other end. They've conceded quite a few goals from set pieces recently, which is an area that's started to creep into their game, which, when you combine the fact that they dominate the ball, they tend to create most of the chances. But if you're vulnerable at set pieces, and that's really all you tend to give the opposition, is the odd chance on the counter-attack or from a dead ball situation. If they're conceding from those and they're not scoring at the other end, then they've got 2 pretty big problems that combine into a serious one that Arteta's got to solve sooner rather than later if they're going to stay in the title race.
Yeah, you've spoken about goal scoring. And Ryan, the article that you've written for ESPN.com about the transfer window, especially in January, the do's and the don'ts, one of the things that you've suggested is looking beyond the big leagues. Now, Karim Benzema is in Saudi Arabia right now, and a bit like Jordan Henderson, who we'll speak about later, supposedly wouldn't be averse to coming back to Europe. So that would check that box. But Ivan Toney is another one. He's going to make his comeback this weekend. He's going to captain Brentford. He's going to start, according to Thomas Frank. Who do you think right now would be a better option short term? Because Toney's the answer long term. But short term for Arsenal, if they could get something done, what would be an easier deal to do you reckon, Ryan? Ivan Toney or Karim Benzema?
It's a tricky question. I mean, I think it goes, would you rather have a guy that's been playing in a, let's just call it a completely uncompetitive league for his skill level for the past 6 months, or a guy that essentially hasn't played soccer for a year? And then you get into Toney, because he's younger, because he's in the Premier League, is just going to be incredibly expensive. And you're dealing with Brentford, who I think are probably the savviest, if not the second savviest team in the transfer market after Brighton. But then on the other hand, you have Benzema playing for one of the public investment fund owned teams in Saudi Arabia. Probably will be harder to get him out of Saudi Arabia than it would be Jordan Henderson. So I don't know. I feel like both moves are, to me, I don't think, like, the bad month that Arsenal's had, they're not close enough to the title race to make a win now move like that. I think bringing in Benzema, who's going to be incredibly expensive, you have no idea how good he's going to be. If you were in first, if you had a 3-point lead on Liverpool and City, maybe it makes a little more sense. But the fact of the matter is the recent struggles, they're just not very likely to win the Premier League. So I don't know, devoting a ton of resources to an older player like Benzema, or with Toney, who's going to be incredibly expensive and only has a couple seasons at the high level. I don't know if either of those moves really make sense, given the kind of weird struggles Arsenal have been having right now.
Stevie, do you expect Arsenal to sign a striker this transfer window?
I don't think so. I don't. The obvious one and the one everybody talks about is Ivan Toney, but you're going to have to pay a king's ransom for him. And I just don't believe that Arsenal are. I think they have a plan, and I don't think it's about panicking on a January transfer window and emptying out your bank account. So I actually don't think they'll make a move. And as Ryan said, either one of the two that we're talking about actually is a bit of a gamble. Listen, Ivan Toney's got an incredible record in the Premier League. You know, he's basically won every other game, but that's playing for Brentford. I don't know whether the way he plays the game will fit in with Arsenal. So, yeah, I don't see them going out, and it probably cost them at least 80 mil to get him. And I'm not sure it's the right fit either. So I don't see it happening. I don't see Benzema either. I don't see them doing anything, to be honest.
Final question goes to James before we start our Bournemouth-Liverpool preview on Sunday. You cover the London beat. You've got your ear to the ground there. Have you heard anything about potential interest? Or as Ryan was saying, Brentford would not be easy to deal with. They don't want to lose Ivan Toney. He might want to go to a bigger club. What are you hearing about any potential moves for Arsenal or for Ivan Toney?
Yeah, well, so the situation as it stands is that, and I'm always wary of saying this on the 19th of January, but I don't think Arsenal are going to do anything this month. There's always the possibility that something could come late. I think they've got a little bit of headroom with FFP, but they don't have a lot. So they can't afford to do an Ivan Toney deal now unless they sell. And Ivan Toney's going to cost 80. Brentford are talking about him being closer to 100. I don't think they'll get 100 for him. I think he'll end up being around the 80 mark if they get the bidding war that they want. They think that there are a number of other clubs who are interested in him in the summer. They don't want to lose him mid-season anyway. He'd obviously be very difficult to replace. If they sold him tomorrow, they'd have 10 days to try and find a centre forward. Yes, they'd have a lot of money, but where could they go with it? So I think the sort of general consensus within the people that I speak to is that there won't really be any movement on Ivan Toney in January. And I think the thing about Benzema is that what Mikel Arteta's done really is, let's not think that they've got an injury crisis, Arsenal, up front. They don't. They've got Gabriel Jesus and they've got Eddie Nketiah, who they decided to pay £100,000 a week. And they pay him that money because he's not going to start, but when he comes off the bench, he's got to deliver. And if Jesus has got an injury, he's got to deliver. Now, they've been very adamant that they're resisting interest in Nketiah from Crystal Palace, who've made inquiries this window and in the previous window. Now, if they were to decide to sell Nketiah to Palace, there then becomes an option to maybe say, well, do we do Benzema for 6 months? And then we look at trying to do Toney in the summer. We could see the economics of that working. I think maybe a stretch, and it depends on the salaries and just exactly how close they are to that FFP ceiling. But whether they could sell Nketiah and then try and do Toney this month, that I think is a bit more of a stretch. And, you know, although there's still time, we're starting to run out of time to do what would obviously be a very big deal with Toney, and then a fairly big deal with the Nketiah situation as well. I think he's going to go with what he's got. Unless some sort of scenario presents itself that we can't quite see at this moment in time. And that ultimately is Arteta's judgment call. Remember the winter when they sold Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang they ripped up his contract and let him go to Barcelona. That was a season where they then said, look, we feel we've got enough to get us over the line in the top four race. They had Lacazette, they had Eddie Nketiah then as well, and they didn't get over the line. That was a call they made in January. It feels like they're making a similar one now, this time around, where they're going to say, this is what we've got. If something amazing presents itself, then brilliant. But I believe these guys can get us over the line. And ultimately, he's going to have to live or die by that decision.
As you say, it's January 19th. Still a lot can happen between now and the close of the January transfer window. As promised, Bournemouth against Liverpool on Sunday. Now, he wasn't going to play anyway because he's away with his country, Egypt, drawing with Ghana on Thursday. But Mohamed Salah has picked up an injury. Jurgen Klopp says he spoke to him last night, but no one seems to be quite sure yet as to the severity of a potential hamstring for Mohamed Salah. Here's Jurgen Klopp to tell us more.
we don't know anything about. I spoke last night with him, and how it is with his injuries. We need further assessment. That's what they are doing now, and then we will know more. Of course, it was in that moment a shock. Oh my God, what's it? Couldn't see that it was like hit by something like this high intense and then going down. You have these kind of hamstring injuries different way, but he still felt it, and we all know how rarely Mo goes off or needs to go off, and so there's definitely something, and we will see. But I have not more information right now.
Stevie, it's difficult for Jurgen Klopp. He doesn't know much. I read an article suggesting that Liverpool might send out a couple of their doctors to take a look at the severity of it. What were your initial thoughts when you heard that, or when you saw that Mohamed Salah had been hurt playing for Egypt?
Well, I guess it's the ultimate nightmare for everybody, fans, Klopp, anybody connected with the club. That your main man basically has a problem, and I'm not sure whether it's worth knowing what the problem is or not, because when you're not sure of what something is, and if they have MRIs, which they will, and everything else, and they're not 100%, and he goes out and tries, because that's ultimately what will end up happening. If they don't find in it, and they might put it down to just something and nothing, and he ends up stepping on the field and then does some real damage, that's the biggest worry. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. Can we just get to the root of the problem? And there's no question, Liverpool's medical staff will be in contact 24/7 with the Egyptian medical staff, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody didn't go out just to not stick their nose in, but just to be there and see what's going on and make sure that everything that should be done is being done, because there's no question. I mean, Mo Salah right now is the Liverpool's crown jewels. You know, without Mo Salah, I don't think Liverpool wins the Premier League. So that's how important it is.
Ryan, Liverpool is your team, and on Sunday they go to Bournemouth, a Bournemouth team that hasn't lost at home in the Premier League since October. Liverpool without Salah, without Trent Alexander-Arnold. How big a hurdle is this for them?
Yeah, it's Bournemouth are the most improved team in the league since the start of the season. Since January, since December, they're one of like the top 4 teams in the league by any sort of metric you look at. And, you know, it's a big change from the first time these teams played this year, where Liverpool, McAllister was sent off early in the second half, and it still didn't end up being a close game. And I think the interesting thing with Bournemouth is, they have a Spanish manager, Toney, and coming to the Premier League, wanted to play a sort of high pressing possession style. And if you look at the numbers over time, Bournemouth has progressively played more and more long balls as the season has gone on. So they've sort of adopted, maybe if you want to call it a stereotypical English style of playing, and they've been a lot more effective. And I think that style has worked pretty well against Liverpool in the past. But yeah, I think Liverpool have enough depth where they can weather a Salah injury, or weather an Alexander-Arnold injury, weather a Dominic Szoboszlai injury, but they have injuries to all 3 of those players, their entire right side, which is sort of the strength of the team. So I think Liverpool are favored to win this game, but I think we're right in looking at this as one of probably the trickiest games they're going to play from here on out.
Just on Salah, apparently there's footage of him leaving the stadium smiling, walking, not on crutches or even limping. Now, I know with a hamstring injury it could be anything, but it doesn't sound like a tear. And although Stevie's right, obviously if it's bad, it's a worst case scenario for Liverpool. But actually, this could be brilliant for them, because if it's a minor problem that requires a couple of weeks rest and he can't really play in AFCON anymore, then maybe he sits there for a couple of weeks. He doesn't play. He ticks over training. Maybe he plays 1 or 2 more games there at the most. And then he comes back and he's not quite had the physical exertion that maybe Liverpool thought he would before he goes out. So again, Stevie's right that it really depends on the severity of it. But I think the fact that he's been photographed or filmed leaving the stadium, coming through the mix zone, smiling, walking unaided, walking without a limp or any kind of major issue. I think the guys there were saying that he's not even had any strapping on it. It sort of suggests that maybe it's not that big a problem. And if that's the case, then actually it could work out pretty well for Liverpool in the long run.
Yeah, a bizarre, cunning plan that wasn't really a plan in the first place that they'll take. Stevie, how worried are you? Exactly. How worried are you about going to Bournemouth for your boys on Sunday?
Again, I don't think worries the right word. It's going to be it's definitely going to be a tricky tie. I mean, you've kind of got two teams who right now are trying to do similar things. You know, Klopp doesn't mind if it's a 70-yard ball from the back. It's a forward ball. If you can see a forward ball, then go and play it. And it seems like that's what Bournemouth are doing. You know, they're not overly trying to have 40 and 50 passes in their own half before they go forward. The message seems to be, look, if there's a ball on, then you play it. So that would make for an open attacking game, which I think would suit Liverpool. Because without Mo Salah, you know, Diaz, Jota, Nunez, Gakpo, they need a little bit more space and time. And if the game's opened up, then that's what you get. Players on the ball will get a little bit more space and a little bit more time, and that will suit Liverpool. So yeah, worry's not the right word. I do have in the back of my mind that Liverpool away from home haven't been totally convincing all season. Yes, they might be sitting at the top of the Premier League, but away from home, results as opposed to calmly outplaying the opposition. So, yeah, worry's not the right word. I would say they've got to defend. If they defend properly, then I think Liverpool will score goals. Let me put it that way. So, yeah, I think this will be a good open attacking game, which will suit Liverpool.
They're certainly consistent away from home. They're unbeaten in their last 6. They drew the first 3 and they've won the next 3. So we'll have full coverage, full reaction to that one on ESPN FC on Sunday after the game. Now, speaking of Liverpool, one of their former players is on the move. Jordan Henderson was in Saudi Arabia, got a bit of flack for moving there. He's now moved closer to home. He's gone to Ajax. I'm not even going to tempt and set this up because there's a question from a journalist, and it's the question we would all ask. Let's find out what that question is and Jordan's answer.
Jordan, you've spoken about how different the challenge was in Saudi Arabia. Given that it was 6 months after a very big decision to leave Liverpool, I just wondered if you had any regrets over that decision to go there in the first place.
I think, listen, looking back, you know, at the time, obviously it was a big decision. It was a decision that I felt was right for me and my family at the time. But, you know, things happen. Like I said before, things happen. Things change quickly in football. And I had to make another decision. And this is the one I felt was the right decision for me. And the opportunity was too big to turn down for me. I was playing at this great football club. And, yeah, I was just so excited by the opportunity. And this is why I wanted to come.
Say that's a yes on regrets, or is it just something that happened?
I think, listen, in life, you know, you can, if you want to call them regrets or mistakes, you can call them that, but at the same time, you know, they're only mistakes if you don't learn from them. And I learned a lot of things out in Saudi. You know, there was a lot of different experiences, and like I said, I haven't got a bad word to say about anybody over there in the league, in the club, the people. They tried to make us feel as comfortable as possible, and my family. And I'll have friends over there that I'll speak to forever. So there's still positives to come out of it, you know. And yeah, in the end, it didn't turn out the way we both wanted it to, but we ended it on great terms. And like I said, we'll shake hands and we'll move forward.
Same question to all three of you. Has his reputation been damaged? Stevie first.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's no question. You know, when you're going for the money, just say you're going for the money. Don't start spinning stories about growing the league, and then you start talking about things at Liverpool, and you know, just tell the truth and keep it simple. And if you do that, then the door will always be open, wherever it may be. But when you start trying to be clever and start making things up that we can all see isn't the case, then I'm afraid when you fall on your face, there's no question there's going to that's going to affect you, and there's no question his reputation has been affected. 6 months. I'll tell you what, he can make some friends in 6 months. He's got a lot of people he's still going to talk to. So yeah, this is a complete mistake. He went about it the wrong way, tried to be too clever when he left, and there's no question that every time he appears, and certainly I think the only time we'll see him is when he's with England, but it'll be the same old question forever and a day. It's not going to change. So yeah, his reputation absolutely has been tarnished a little.
James.
So he left his agent in 2020 to look after himself, and I think we're seeing probably the fruits of that. Well, probably the fruits of that is the wrong term, but maybe that was a big mistake now, because I don't think he's been. I think the lack of good advice around him has really shown in the last sort of 6-8 months. Because Stevie says, if he'd said, right, look, I understand the issues around this. I understand everybody's complaints and concerns as a prominent advocate and defender of the LGBT+ community and all the work that I've done to support that community. But this money is life-changing. It's too good to turn down. I'm going to give some of it back to charity or to support that community in another way. Or, if he'd gone there and then now he'd said, you know what, even though the money's great, I just hate it here. The standard of football is not what I expected. I'm playing in front of 1,000 people each week. This is not what I signed up for. I realised I still want to try and continue a top-level club career back in Europe. I think people would have a hell of a lot more respect for him than they've got now. And the fact is that it's only Gareth Southgate's loyalty to him, really, that has kept him anywhere near the England squad. Because I think a lot of other managers would not have burnt so much political capital in defending Henderson in the way that Southgate did in the last 2 or 3 camps. I remember talking to Southgate about this. Are you not concerned about the backlash that he's going to get from supporters? And he seemed almost bemused by the idea that fans would be upset about Henderson going out there. Of course, what happens? He comes on, he gets booed. I think he's going to get booed for the rest of his England career because of this. I don't think there's any kind of rehabilitation, particularly at 33. How many more tournaments has he got in him? You'd think this summer Euros is probably the last one. And he probably still will go because Southgate feels that he's such an important part of the leadership group. He's an important characteristic within the squad, binding everyone together. And he is a good lad. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a genuinely nice guy who's just, I was going to say he's badly advised. He's had no advice at all. And he's made some mistakes along the way. And unfortunately, in terms of his footballing career, he's going to regret that, I think, for some time. Ryan,
just moving on a little bit, if he does well at Ajax, as James was saying, he reckons he'll go to the Euros in Germany. Do you expect that will be the case? Does it depend on performances, or is it just going to be a case of if he plays enough, then, as James was saying, the loyalty aspect should be enough to take him as part of the 23-man squad?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that he made this move and was sort of battered by fans, and Southgate seemed kind of bizarrely seemed surprised that happened, and then Southgate continued to rely on him, suggests that he'll be there this summer. I unless someone else in that kind of 8, 6 role kind of plays lights out from now until the end of the season, and I'm not sure there are that many candidates for that role. I think Henderson will be there unless he's just awful in the Eredivisie, and I really don't think he will be, because as he's gotten older, he's not the Jordan Henderson that just runs around and covers a ton of ground. He's now a pretty creative passer, basically, is what his game is at this point. And the Dutch league, playing for Ajax, where you have better players than almost everyone in the league, other than their struggles this season aside, there's not as much asked from you from a defensive perspective. So I think he'll look quite good for Ajax from now until the end of the season, and then he'll end up on the Euro squad.
Before we go on,
can I just say one thing about this? Is that I think also England have kind of evolved beyond him a little bit. So when he played in the World Cup, he was kind of holding Bellingham's hand a little bit, and I think we've all seen in the last year that Bellingham doesn't need anyone to hold his hand anymore. And I think England's midfield composition has slightly changed in that I think what he wants to do is play Rice and Phillips as 2 holders and play Bellingham as a 10 and effectively let him go and dictate the games. We saw that against Scotland to devastating effect. He was phenomenal that night. And I think that might be the way that he wants to play it, which means that Henderson won't be in the starting lineup. But I think I could see him squeezing into the squad because of his versatility. And if they want to switch it, then obviously you can do that.
Was that deliberate that we dig at Scotland, Ollie? Just wanted to chuck that in towards the end of the show, yeah?
Yeah, maybe so.
Just in case you've forgotten it. Just in case you've forgotten it. That's all.
Well, it's a meaningless game. I mean, we drew 0-0 in a Euro game at Wembley.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Didn't feel meaningless when you were all waving your flags before kick-off and giving it the big one. Right?
He's a brave boy, Stevie, right? Brave boy.
Good job on the studio, isn't it?
Quickly move on to transfer talk and end this before the referee stops the contest. We've already spoken about Ivan Toney. Kieran Trippier was an interesting one. Stevie and Ryan and myself out here in the States all woke up to this morning. Happened probably about lunchtime UK time. The speculation linking Kieran Trippier with a swap deal potentially with Joshua Kimmich at Bayern Munich. There's a lot going on with this one, James. You heard anything that would suggest this one might have any semblance of truth?
Yeah, so we've done a story on this on the site. It is complicated. Essentially, Bayern want to sign a right back. They did in the summer. They tried very, very hard to get Kyle Walker from Manchester City. Thomas Tuchel was driving that quite strongly. Obviously, Walker ended up staying, and so they've looked at other alternatives. Nordi Mukiele at PSG is their preferred choice, but what they want to do is sign him on a loan for 6 months with an option to buy, whereas PSG want to sell him because they want the money now to then reinvest in their squad. And because this situation is dragged on to the extent that they've not found an agreement, what Bayern are doing is starting to look at alternatives. So they kind of did this. If you remember what happened with the centre-back situation where they came in very late in the day for Radin Dragusin, who ended up going from Genoa to Tottenham, they started looking at Eric Dyer as a backup position. And obviously, they've ended up going for Dyer. But the situation with Dyer, of course, is that he was quite desperate to leave Spurs because he'd been frozen out by Postecoglou. He had 6 months left on his contract at Spurs and they were willing to do business. Trippier is a very different situation. He's under contract until 2025. He's been a hugely influential part of the renaissance that Eddie Howe's engendered at Tottenham, at Newcastle. He's obviously captained the team as well on occasion, and I don't think they've got any desire to lose him whatsoever. So Bayern probably have to, why would they loan him? I mean, it would be crazy for Newcastle to think about loaning him. So if we're talking about a permanent deal, then I think the Bayern are going to have to come up with a decent amount of money, even though, as you say, he's 33 years old. So I think it's a contingency plan based on the fact that there's some frustration with the negotiation with PSG. I think the PSG option is still their preferred choice, but it's an interesting alternative. And obviously, Trippier has played abroad before. He was very successful with Atletico Madrid in Spain. So, you could see potentially where the temptation would be. Thomas Tuchel obviously knows the Premier League very well. So, there'd be good link-ups there. Clearly, he would know Harry Kane and Eric Dyer as well from his time at Tottenham. But it feels as though there's too many cogs that have to turn for this one to come off. But an interesting story nevertheless.
Stevie, we've got a few rascals among the ESPN FC production staff, and Sam is one of them, and he just chucked in a little bit of a grenade. Does this mean that Harry Kane perhaps isn't settling as well as maybe he otherwise would be because Spurs and others are having all their players go over to join him, and he's getting all his pals back together? That's just rascal journalism.
No, it's nonsense is what it is. I'll tell you what, if he ever settles, can you imagine how good he'll be then? I mean, the guy can't stop scoring goals, so if he's unsettled, let's have more of that. Yeah, complete nonsense. What a I mean, that's just made up. Really, it's just made up. It sounds good, feeds into the narrative of Trippier going there, but the reality is it's absolute nonsense. And for Trippier, I actually think it would be a fantastic move because we've seen at 33 years of age the way Newcastle play the game. We've seen recently how the physical side of the game, because he's 33 and the amount of running he's having to do, it's catching up with him. And that would certainly ease a little bit going to Bayern. So for Kieran Trippier, it would be a fantastic move. It would probably be a good move for Harry Kane. get one of his England teammates alongside him. That would be great. So yeah, great for Trippier. But as far as Harry Kane unsettled, absolute nonsense.
Let's end with Ryan and a little opportunity for you to plug your article that you've written on ESPN.com about the January window, but also about Antonio Nusa, who's the Club Brugge winger who's been linked with a move to Spurs. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the topics of your article is maybe looking a little bit outside the box and outside the main leagues. Does this one make sense for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This window itself has been interesting in how little movement there's been. I think there's been 4 permanent transfers that have happened and maybe 3 or 4 loans. And Spurs have made 2 moves already, Timo Werner and Dragusin, and then now they're looking at Nusa. And I think, the takeaway from the article is mainly that most of the money spent in the transfer market is completely useless, essentially. Even if you look at big money transfers, ones that are 50 million or more, those players only play about on average 60% of the minutes for their new team, which is not a lot. That's less than 2/3 of the minutes. There's a stat in the article that club record transfers only play on average 50% of the available minutes for their new club. So given all of that, we've seen Brighton, their approach is to just kind of spread their bets around, right? They're not signing anyone for 50 million. They're going to sign 10 players for 5 million. And if a couple of them hit, then you have these star players that are going to make your team better, more than one that are going to make your team better. And then you can sort of book a massive profit on that. So, that approach requires a little more patience, I think, because a lot of these players aren't going to work out because they're sort of a little bit riskier, I guess. But yeah, the Nusa signing, I think it just signals that Spurs feel like they're on the threshold, right? They could finish 4th, they could finish 5th, they could drop down. So they need to kind of reinforce the squad a bit. And I think, yeah, the Nusa signing is a little bit outside of the mainstream, not one of the big 5 leagues. So, there's a little bit of signal and savviness behind this move.
Finally, James, what do we know about Nusa, this 18-year-old forward from Norway?
Well, we should just say that this deal's not done. There's quite a long way to go, and from what I'm told, this wouldn't be for this season. So, I think the plan is what Bruges want to do anyway is loan him. Well, essentially, if they sell him, is to have him back on loan for the rest of this season, and then he'd join in the summer. And I think that makes a lot of sense from Tottenham's point of view because essentially so Nusa's a 2-footed sort of wide forward. He's quick, he's skillful. He's exciting a lot of people in Norway. He's quite versatile. He can play in a lot of similar positions. Primarily, obviously, Werner can play off the left. I know Werner can play through the middle as well. But you sort of don't really understand why you'd signed Werner and Nusa in this window. So I think what they're doing is they're signing Werner for now, and they're looking at Nusa for next season. And then obviously they've got an option whether they want to take up on Werner. And if Werner has a stellar 6 months and they decide they want to take up that option, then brilliant. If they don't, then they've got this kid potentially coming in to take that place in the squad, and then with that potential. And also, I think it's important that it marks a bit of a return to Tottenham's sort of roots, if you like, that there was this big internal struggle under Antonio Conte about the type of the sort of profile of player that they wanted to sign. So on the one hand, he wanted them to sign experienced 28, 29, 30-year-olds, maybe even older in cases, for example, even Perisic. It's actually quite symbolic today that when the news of Nusa broke, Perisic has gone out on loan back to Hajduk Split. I think that says a lot about where Tottenham are now, that they want to go back to their roots of trying to sign younger players who develop them and potentially sell them on for big money, or, of course, develop them into fantastic players who play for years and years for Spurs. So, it makes a lot of sense, particularly, I think, if they can get that deal over the line. Don't forget that Chelsea made an inquiry about him as well, and there are 1 or 2 other Premier League clubs who've looked at him. So they've still got a distance to travel on this one. But I think if they can get him in on a loan, get him in now, but keep him at Bruges and then bring him in the summer, it does make a lot of sense in terms of the way that Postecoglou is trying to build his squad and Tottenham going back to their roots.
Yeah, good info, good intel. Thank you to James, thank you to Ryan, and thank you to Stevie as well. There's plenty football action this weekend. 4 games in the Premier League, plus on ESPN Plus. Real Madrid taking on Almeria Sunday at 10:15 Eastern Time kickoff. ESPN FC pre-game show half an hour earlier. Barcelona also in action this weekend. That's a tough one. Going down south to face Real Betis. Again, FC begins at noon Eastern, kickoff at 12:30. And I'll be on the call on Monday for Granada against Atletico Madrid, fresh from that fantastic victory over Real Madrid. Yeah, over Real Madrid. It's been a long show. When you start talking about Scotch pies and 35 minutes later, you're still rambling. It's time to wrap up. So it's Betis Barca on Sunday, Atleti in action on Sunday. There's Bundesliga as well. My thanks to everyone who's watched, and we'll do it all again this weekend, starting with full coverage on the whistle of Arsenal against Palace tomorrow. Bye for now.